So here's the problem, is that if the God that I believe in exists, then he's a God who knows everything. He knows all past things. He knows all present things. He knows all future things. And he knows all future possible things, what in philosophy is called a counterfactual. So I'll give you an example of what I mean. You could have chosen not to come here. You could have decided, you know what, I want to go get dinner and a movie, and I'd rather not hear that guy again. You could have chosen that. And from that decision, a billion other things would have occurred. Billions of things would have occurred. You could have gotten indigestion. You could have had an argument on the way to the restaurant. You could have gotten in a car accident. You could have stopped somebody who needed help. You might have said something nice to the waitress where it would have affected her day, and her day would have been changed when she went home and talked to her husband, and they would have made up, and their marriage would have got saved. Who knows what would have happened? A billion things would have happened, and that's one decision one person makes. So God knows all the decisions and all the counterfactual decisions, the ones you could have made but didn't. So he knows all that spiderweb of future history. So isn't it possible, I ask my friend, that a God who knows all of that could have a morally sufficient reason to allow, not cause, but allow some instance of suffering to happen in our lives for a greater possible good that we have no ability with our limited finite minds to know about? It might become obvious to us in 5 minutes or 50,000 years or in the eternity to come, but isn't it at least possible? The first thing he said was no. I'm like, well, I spent all that time. No, that's your answer? But he said, no, the tsunami that happened in 2004. Remember that tsunami that wiped out 250,000 people and left millions homeless? He's like, how can you possibly say that? That tsunami results in a greater possible good. I said, here's the problem with your answer, is that what you're telling me is you know with 100% certainty there is no possible future where there is something better that could come about because of that tragedy. So you're claiming to have infinite knowledge of the future. And if you're claiming to have infinite knowledge of the future, you're using your infinite knowledge of the future to disprove the existence of a being who has infinite knowledge of the future. Do you see how self-defeating that actually is? And he agreed, and that's when the conversation really shifted. By this time, the waitresses stopped serving us the coffee, and we were the only ones left in the restaurant. And he looks up at me from the cold coffee with sort of a mist gathering in front of his eyes, and he says, I want to know this. How can you tell me this God values me or my mother and that he's good when he let her die when I was 10? See, the philosophical rubber meets the existential road at this particular moment, doesn't it? It's not an academic question anymore. In fact, it never was. Never was. So what do you do at that moment? Well, I prayed quick, and I asked the Lord to give me something that would be true and relevant to his pain. You see, here's the problem. He was 10 when that happened. He was 38 when he asked me. 28 years of atheism did not clear up the tears. It never gave him fulfillment, because if Dawkins is right, Richard Dawkins is right, one of the most prominent atheists in the world, he says the universe is blind, pitiless, and indifferent. There is no such thing as evil or good, no design, no purpose. All we have is meaningless tragedies and meaningless good fortune. So her death was not a tragedy, it was a meaningless tragedy. He offers him no comfort whatsoever. So you can live with that, or you can suggest the alternative. So I said this to him. I said, we've been talking for a while now, and you agreed that God could allow suffering for a greater possible good. You agreed. That's possible. He said, yeah, because he was waiting for me to use his mother as a punchline to a philosophical argument. I said, you know what? It's a nice theory. A Christian can tell you that. A Muslim can tell you that. A Buddhist can tell you that. A Hindu can tell you that. Some Hindus. They can tell you this. God works in mysterious ways. It's a nice theory. But you've experienced a terrible loss. I have no idea what it feels like to experience that loss. I've lost people, but never someone so close to me, especially at such a tender age. I can't imagine. He called it a life-shaping moment. Of course it was. So, but here's what I want to offer you. That theory is valid, but that's all it is, unless it's backed up by history. And contra to Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, any other ism and schism you can think of, contrary to all those worldviews, I don't have a mere theory that gives me a mere glimpse of hope. I have actual fact to back up that God could allow suffering for a greater possible good because God did allow suffering for the greatest possible good. He let his own son die, not for some theoretical good, but for the greatest good there could possibly be, the salvation of the entire world. He offers that to you, I said, and he offered that to your mother. Then you asked me one other question. You asked me the question about value. You said, how can I know that God values me or my mother? How do you know how valuable anything is? How do you know? It's not rocket science, really. You know, there's these wonderful things in my house, all these, these pictures my kids draw when they were kids, and you say, oh, how beautiful. It's not really, but you say it is because it's your kid, and you put it on and it's like a bad Picasso, and you put it on your refrigerator and all this, and they write you little notes, and my wife sent me stuff, and my wedding video, and my wedding pictures, all valuable. But if there's a fire in my house, I'm getting my wife and my kids, and we're getting out, and I'm not going to save those things. They're all going to burn or melt or whatever, because I'm not going to make my wife a widow or my kids fatherless over those things. I value them, but not that much. But if my wife or my child or my kids are in that house, you better believe it. I will risk everything to save them. You know how valuable something is by what you're willing to pay for it. And a blind, pitiless, indifferent universe does not pay for you. But the immeasurable God paid an immeasurable price to spend an immeasurable eternity with your mother and with you. You can know that you have an objective, immeasurable value because of that. You see, so friends, pain is the signal of value. If you were to go to any other worldview, and they would tell you what is pain all about, a Muslim would tell you it's just a test. It's a test of your faith. When you lose a child, when you lose someone, when you are injured, it's a test to see, are you going to blame God or whatever it is? And there's a validity to that to a point. But when that's all it is, it seems awfully cruel. A Hindu would tell you it's your karma. It's the bad karma from a previous life coming to revisit upon you. But you have to realize something, friend. It's all an illusion. See, you're the divine being. A Buddhist would say the same thing, that all pain is an illusion, and you need to wake up from the illusion of the reality you're living in, because it's not really real. And then when you get rid of that illusion, you'll be free of pain and suffering. And all these things. And an atheist would say basically, tough, get over it. Don't tell you. The problem is none of those things deals with the real issue, does it? Just a test, it seems cruel. If it's an illusion, if your suffering is an illusion, then the person you lost meant nothing. I mean, can you imagine losing someone and then feeling nothing about it? Then that person meant nothing. But if you feel the deep anguish of pain, that means that person actually meant something to you. Pain is the signal of value. That's why you can know you have value, because God himself, in a world where suffering exists, suffers himself for your sake. My buddy looked at me and he said, it's a lot to think about, but man, that's worth believing. So pain and suffering, I don't think are meaningless. If there's no God, then they are. But I think that you can see that God actually does allow suffering. I can trust that God has allowed suffering in any one of our lives because God did allow suffering in his own existence for a greater good. We can trust him in that. Why does he allow your particular suffering? I have no idea. I would be insulting you if I told you I knew why. I don't know why he allows mine. But the good news is that because of the suffering he went through, I'll have an eternity to find out. And so will you. And I really can't give you more comfort than that, other than to say there's nowhere else you can go for a better answer than that.